politics has suffered. Entrenched interests, those who benefit from an unjust status quo, resisted any government efforts to give working families a fair deal, marshaling an army of lobbyists and opinion makers to argue that minimum wage increases or stronger labor laws or taxes on the wealthy who could afford it just to fund crumbling schools, that all these things violated sound economic principles.
Yeah. If only America would just raise taxes on those who could afford it to help fix up those crumbling schools. Folks, you take any Democratic speech given by a Democratic presidential candidate or even a high-ranking local state official, and it's all about the same crumbling schools, and we got to fix the crumbling school. It's just such tired rhetoric. But to use it, and to use it at the event yesterday, as the president did, as you just heard, during his speech in honor of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, 50 years back to the day. As we welcome you back to the Steve Malzberg Show, and we welcome in Jennifer Rubin, columnist for the Washington Post and the Right Turn column. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm just fine. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I know you did a great job dissecting and critiquing the president's speech. You know, I could have come out with some of the reaction by the mainstream media, how this was one of his best speeches ever. This may not be judged as the greatest just yet, but you give it 10 years, people are going to look back and say, "Wow, this was unbelievable." I found this to be typical divisive, angry Obama, and really didn't do much for me.
Yeah, it's amazing how unmemorable he is. Aside from a few campaign slogans, "We're the ones we've been waiting for," whatever that nonsense was, he never says anything that's terribly memorable. Can you remember a single line from yesterday?
No,
I can't.
Not at all.
And I listened to it, read it multiple times, wrote on it, and I can't remember a single line. It was that memorable. It's also interesting when you play it. You notice how he's sort of imitating King. He breaks the sentences up into those little bits. A little bit of a Southern twang comes in there. That's not how he talks to Congress. That's not how he talks at a presser with a foreign leader.
Right.
It's so condescending. It really is. And he truly is a divisive figure because he cannot understand that other people are well-intentioned, convinced, and maybe even right about matters of public policy. They must be evil. They must be intending to discriminate. They must be closed-minded. They must be anti-science. It never dawns on him that he's not right and on the side of the angels. And so there's no disagreeing with him. You're just a bad person. You're just a racist.
Right.
No wonder nothing gets done. I did notice that Bill Clinton stuck in a line there, which a few commentators did notice, where he said Dr. King didn't march and sacrifice his life, I'm paraphrasing here, so that we could whine about gridlock.
Yep.
I couldn't agree more.
Yep. No, absolutely.
I
mean, it goes back to an interview that he did with Tom Joyner in the White House the day before the speech. Although he didn't bring it up, he was asked what would Martin Luther King Jr. think of Obamacare, and instead of saying something with a little humility, like, hey, look, this isn't about Obamacare, or I don't know, I could only imagine he might. Oh, he'd love it. He'd love it.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd love, all the dithering over foreign policy. I'm sure he'd love, all the other magnificent things he does. Oh, wait a second. Did we have the highest level of black unemployment in quite a number of years? Do we have the highest poverty level ever? Do we have the most people on food stamps? I don't think Dr. King would like all that, really. But, you almost give up trying because there's no individual like there was, even with Bill Clinton, whose policies I often disagreed with, who you can sit down at the end of the day and say, okay, forget the rhetoric. Where's the deal? What do you want to do? There's never that moment for Obama. He is so infatuated with himself and so immersed in his own nonsensical rhetoric that there's never that moment for soul-searching, for getting down to business, for seeing things from the other guy's side. And that's in part, not entirely, but that's in part why he's been such a crappy president.
Yeah, no, well, I couldn't agree with you more. We're talking to Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post here on the Steve Malzberg Show. And you're right. I mean, you pointed out in your piece that when he talks about the things that are wrong, when he talks about the injustices or whatever, I mean, he kind of leaves out that he's been there for 5 years and what he's done to make it better or what he plans to do to make it better.
Yeah, it is kind of pathetic. You always think, gosh, if it wasn't for that guy in the White House. Oh, you are the guy in the White House. Now I remember. And even worse than that, these people are so desperate to play out and to play act the civil rights movement and, think of themselves as the current Dr. Kings, that they focus on the wrong thing. Listen, we have a legal structure and a set of, I think, popular attitudes that is precisely what Dr. King thought. But what we don't have are functional black families. What we don't have are good inner city schools. What we don't have is a president who would support vouchers. In fact, he tried to defund them in his own hometown, Washington, D.C., to the detriment of poor and mostly minority students. We're fighting the wrong battles, or at least he is. He's focused on the wrong things. He considers the dynamic to always be the rich are getting richer at the expense of the poor.
Right, and then this absolutely you can't anybody who succeeds, of course, except of course Oprah and basketball players and athletes and movie stars that he's friends with that make no matter how many millions and millions or billions they make, they're fine. But anybody else who succeeds, it's at the expense of, it has to be at the expense of somebody. They're holding people down. They're not sharing the wealth. They're not benefiting these people. They're not employing these people. They're not giving these people benefits. They're not creating other wealth. Nope, if they're rich, they're evil.
Yeah. By the way, did you find it a bit strange that Jay-Z was there for the March on Washington? Somehow I don't think Dr. King might have approved. There was so much frivolousness, unseriousness, so much star searching and stargazing there that I think it really said something about the mentality of our current leaders, that these are the people they consider worthy of speaking on this occasion. Really, Jay-Z?
Well, yeah, Jamie.
That's the best you could do? Yeah,
and Jamie Foxx mentioned, and we're going to play his sound bites a little bit later on, probably after we say so long to you. But not only that, Jay-Z and some of the other people who spoke, but it was pointed out that the only black member of the U.S. Senate, of course, was not invited to speak because he's got an R next to his name.
There's now some controversy, as I heard just before going on the air with you, as to whether he was invited and turned it down, whether he was never invited. But I think we can all agree on this. Howard Kurtz, who is now with Fox News, put it this way. He said the whole thing seemed like an MSNBC production, and it was. I mean, the entire thing was to associate Dr. King, whose great achievement, of course, was making civil rights a cause for white Americans, not just minority Americans. They succeeded in making the whole thing this partisan, divisive, boring tribute to themselves. And, I just think that we are so plagued by really inconsequential people. Maybe we get the leadership we deserve. Maybe Americans are too plugged out. Maybe they're too unconcerned about public policy and politics in general. But I think we have really never had the crop of candidates and the crop of elected officials that are so bad as the people that we have now. And frankly, there's a lot of deadwood on both sides of the aisle. There really are no super impressive people.
Oh, no.
I mean, where are the giants? I mean, I don't see
Well,
any.
there's none in the Republican Party, that's for sure. I mean, you mentioned the vouchers. Do you think it would behoove the Republicans to once during a presidential debate or during a presidential campaign to point out, hey, look what the president did in his own backyard to mostly black children by defunding that voucher program? I never heard those words come out of the lips of Mitt Romney once, and that's just now what we've got with health care and immigration. I mean, I'm just waiting for Boehner to get out a rubber stamp and say, yes, Mr. President, and stamp it all.
Well, this has been an ongoing frustration that I have, that it is not simply enough to say, now, listen, I'm pleased they're saying no to most of what Obama is putting out there. I'm pleased, don't get me wrong. But it's not enough just to do that. They really have to show the country an alternative vision. They really have to show that they're not insensitive or uninterested, frankly, in the plight of poor people or in promoting upward mobility or increasing employment. You get the feeling, if you listen to these people, it's just about stopping Obama. And that's the immediate task. But I really don't see from them why in all of these years that they have been now in control of the House have they not passed an alternative to Obamacare. Yes, a number of people have introduced or come up with them. They've never voted on them, never passed one. I don't know what they would pass. What would be the alternative if we finally got rid of Obamacare? I don't know.
I do. I mean, basically, and it doesn't seem like you need they have to be brain surgeons to do it, although some of them are surgeons in there. They get the doctors together with the leadership and say, okay, we keep the elimination of the donut hole. We keep the extending, people want to keep their kids, so-called kids, on their plans till they're 85. Put them on till they're 85. You also like pre-existing conditions, put that in there. You put a 1 or 2 sheet out there and say, here's what we're going to keep, but we're getting rid of the other 2,000 pages that are going to destroy the system and destroy your life. Why can't they do that?
I know. I find myself, in exactly your predicament, so frustrated. This is not that hard. You are absolutely right. And likewise, why aren't they going, instead of just saying no to the president who comes out with one crackpot higher education bill after another so that we load more and more debt onto these kids, why don't the Republicans ever go after universities for price gouging? The Democrats are so good at this. How many times have they called those executives from oil companies in and harangued them and accused them of price setting? Why don't Republicans ever do that with university presidents? These are institutions that are, really gouging the customer. It's amazing how closely they track each other's prices. Listen, from an ideological point of view, I'll be candid. These are not people who are friendly to the conservative movement or to American values in many cases.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't seem that there's a big strategic thinker or even a middle class strategic thinker. It's frustrating, to say the least.
Very, very frustrating and disappointing. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if Obama didn't call them all in and say, hey, that NSA program? Well, you're not immune to it. And they started quaking in their boots. I don't know what to think. Anyway, Jennifer, a pleasure speaking to you as always. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. Jennifer Rubin, Washington Post columnist.